Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with the leaders of VMware Security, Patrick Morley, SVP and GM, Security Business Unit VMware, Tom Gillis, SVP and GM Network and Security Business Unit VMware, Shankar Iyer, SVP and GM, End User Computing Business Unit VMware. Pleasure to have you here today.
Great to be here.
Great to be here, Shira.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shira.
So VMware just wrapped up Security Connect, your annual cybersecurity conference, which brought together customers and partners against the backdrop of worsening cyber threats, SolarWinds, Microsoft Exchange attacks, ransomware attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure companies like Colonial Pipeline and JBS. Patrick, are organizations and security industry as a whole prepared to defend against these increasingly sophisticated threats?
Well, obviously, based on what we've all seen and what we've read in the news, the new world order is challenging for security professionals globally. Last quarter, in Q1 of 2021, VMware saw a 100% increase in attacks that our partners, our incident response partners, were remediating. Over 1,000 attacks that our partners were in, and again, 100%. So obviously, the number of attacks occurring is up, and so the question is why. And as we know, with the pandemic, the way that we work has changed dramatically, and frankly, with the cloud, the way that we compute has changed dramatically. And so, as we call it, as security professionals, the surface area of attack is dramatically changed. And so we fundamentally need to change the way we're approaching security. And that's why at VMware, I think it's neat that the three of us are all here today to talk to you, because I think the breadth of what VMware can offer to customers to help better see and stop the adversary is better than any other vendor in the marketplace. And it's based, the foundation of that is on a simple idea, which is to distribute security services into the fabric of the way that we work, the way we do compute, et cetera. And it's based on the methodology of zero trust, which essentially is the approach where the market has to go over the coming quarters and years in this new world.
Oh, very interesting. And it seems like VMware is at the convergence of being able to stop these modern threats, particularly the attacks targeting cloud infrastructure and applications. So Tom, how is VMware evolving its security portfolio to address these challenges?
Well, we make the assumption that no matter what you do at the perimeter, the attacks that Patrick was talking about, they're so sophisticated, somehow, some way, somebody's going to find a way in. Yeah. So at VMware, we're really focused on not trying to keep the bad guys out, but stopping them from having the run of the tables once they're in. And the way we do this is we have distributed security that we can apply to each little piece of your infrastructure. So imagine the web server gets one little piece of security, a database gets a different piece of security, and we can custom and automatically tailor the policy to each one of those pieces. This is what allows us to stop these threats from moving laterally inside your infrastructure. And that's actually where all the damage is done. And we are uniquely positioned to do this at VMware.
Well, certainly decentralized is the way to go. And Shankar, we can't talk about security without talking about remote work and hybrid work, which seems to be the next phase for most organizations. And we could look at that from a plus as well as a minus. There are a lot of good things about it, but we also see a lot of pitfalls that happen as well. What should be top of mind for CISOs welcoming employees back to the office while some will remain remote?
Yeah, absolutely, Shira. So, we've seen sort of the significant rise of remote work since the advent of the pandemic. But as the pandemic progressed, what we learned from our customers and ourselves is that the model is shifting to what we're calling anywhere work or work from anywhere. And that means you've got to support models that could be fully remote, it could be fully in the office for certain roles. But a large part of the organizations are going to this hybrid work model. And you've just heard the last 2-3 weeks, many of the Silicon Valley companies, Uber, Facebook, Apple, including VMware, have stated what the future hybrid work model is. In this model, it's not just hybridity, but it's really supporting experiences that we call cutting across multiple modalities. So it means there are users that are going to work from their personal devices, from their home devices, from corporate devices that have been shipped to them, sometimes through sort of virtual desktops, sometimes in branch offices, sometimes in small sites. So at any point, you've got a distributed workforce that's essentially working And so if you think about topologies, it's a distributed topology, just like Patrick and Tom spoke about. So in this model, the CISO has to really look at a distributed security model, where they've got to be thinking about security at the endpoint. So protecting the endpoint, right? It's protecting the data and applications on the endpoint. It's creating sort of access tiers that are controlled as traffic goes out of the endpoint into the cloud or the network. And then a set of security technologies that cut a swath through this, cloud network, if you will, and then back into the cloud that Tom just spoke about, where itself you have multiple distributed security models. So it's imperative for CISOs to implement this distributed security model, and the framework that we think is going to prevail, as Patrick just said, is a zero trust framework. And that's where I think you have to bring together multiple security technologies that are carefully orchestrated to make sure that you're not just protected, but also if threats do come in, you can quickly mitigate them and move on.
I think you had said something, well, a lot of things very important, but certainly layering the technology of the right things upon each other in order to have the proper solution, and certainly zero trust woven into that, is critical for every organization. And it used to be that InfoSec teams were the ones that were solely responsible for the security of the organization. And that appears to be changing now, certainly through digital transformation across all organizations, whether being within the organization or across organizations. So Patrick, how are you helping your customers approach security as a team sport?
Yeah, we've obviously seen a big change, especially over the last 5 years or so, where security has become a team sport, and it's not just sitting on the InfoSec team to deliver it all. And we see forward-leaning organizations that are leveraging exactly what Shankar and what Tom talked about, which is changing the paradigm of how they approach security. And in order to do that, InfoSec can't do it alone. And in fact, if you look at the VMware model of distributing security as a service and putting it everywhere that we are and everywhere that the customer needs it, there's different teams that are going to touch that. Networking teams, desktop services teams, DevOps, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. And so each one of them are playing a part in that. And the really powerful thing that we're able to do by putting security out into all these spots is that we can create a common language for all of those that team to use. Because one of the biggest challenges in security today is that I see the estate or the environment in one way, and then my colleague who's in infrastructure or on the networking side is using a different tool and actually sees it in a different way. And VMware can break down all of those barriers, and we can, by distributing our security services, we can in each one of our products provide a common view so that everyone sees the risk across the entire organization. And then again, we can implement a zero trust strategy, leveraging our products in a very holistic way. And the benefits are exponential. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2. You're getting a multiplier effect here on your ability to leverage your most precious resource, which is your team.
Oh, very interesting. And thank you for that share. So Tom and Shankar, today, the major challenges for security are the number of surfaces to defend, as you were discussing earlier, the growing number of silos, and way too little context. So can you please both talk to me a little bit about VMware's vision for simplifying the security? And certainly, Patrick, you can weigh in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and then Shankar, you can offer your perspective. But Patrick talked about the team sport. Well, I'll argue one of the most valuable team members is a computer. And what I mean by that is automating these security controls. Right? In the data center, we have a vision of creating these advanced security policies that are written as software and attached to the workload. So that web server protection bubble that I talked about, the database protection bubble, that's coded up ahead of time and then automatically deployed. Wherever that web server moves and database moves, the security goes with it. And so that's using automation as a very, very powerful ally. And we're doing exactly the same thing with end users. And Shankar, maybe you can talk about SASE and how we're automatically applying security to these mobile users.
No, I'll build on that. So I think, Shira, as you talked about, it's not just the number of surfaces, but it's also the heterogeneity and the diversity. So if you think about the biggest attack surface these days, it's the endpoints. And today you have, multiple kinds of endpoints. You have iOS, Android, Windows, Chrome, Mac, etc. And also, these endpoints have different form factors and they're used in different ways. So first thing you need a unifying way to sort of manage and secure these endpoints, which we do with our unified endpoint management portfolio. But in addition, you need to then sort of have a way to, protect traffic as it sort of egresses at tier, which means what you're doing is you're not using perimeter technology to block it, but rather you're using intelligence and analytics to determine who gets access to what. So there is what we call a contextual access layer that helps you protect it and leverages identity technologies. And then as Tom alluded to, we have a whole bunch of SASE services, Secure Access Services Edge, which is a layer of services that protects the enterprise as sort of traffic sort of permeates from that edge layer, endpoint layer, all the way back to the cloud or the data center. And these services include things like cloud web security, CASB, remote browser isolation, firewall as a service, and so on. So it's the interesting thing about these multiple technologies is that, again, as Tom alluded to, you need a way to sort of orchestrate policy across that. So what we're really building in our Zero Trust solution is the ability to orchestrate these policies across these diverse technologies in a fashion where you can control the outcomes as opposed to, having to sort of do it independently. So that's the power I think you need to really protect yourself against these multiple services that are completely diverse and heterogeneous.
Oh, wonderful. And Patrick, final words on that, please.
Well, I think the VMware is very serious about security. And as we look at the changing landscape, the two big spots where we think we can really help organizations is we can simplify what you're doing on the security side and better protect organizations, giving them a nice ROI as the world changes, as it moves to the distributed edge that Shankar was just talking about, and to the cloud. Those two big themes we can help organizations handle.
Well, pleasure speaking with you all today, and thank you very much for your share of your information.
Great, Shira. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.